Okay, so for tonight, we left off. I was working, or we were working on modeling a lofted vessel. Now, I did have to go back and make some modifications to mine. I do want to go over that. I was having a lot of problems with the shell command, which is under modify or above, depending on where you're getting at it. And shell, what that does is it hollows out a form. And as you can see in my in mine here, it now has a hollowed form. It's effectively a three-dimensional offset tool. So whereas offset is for a two-dimensional sketch and offsets a line, shell offsets the entire inside, or rather creates an internal volume uh, dependent on the thickness of the wall you want. And you start it, and I'll cycle back through just to address that. You start it by clicking on a face you want to leave open, because shell means it's not going to go all the way through. And as you see from the pop-up, it leaves a face open so you can make a hollow form that has an opening. And that's effectively what you do. Now, the problem I ran into last week was that mine was too weirdly complex because of some lofting errors that I was running into. So I'll go over how I fixed that. But the other things we're going to go over tonight is discussing what I needed to do to fix that. And what I had to do was move some items around in my history bar. And since they weren't that complex, I could just delete them and redraw it or whatever. But what we're going to be doing tonight, and I will open up the example that I made before, is hide these construction planes. So we made a body. We made a handle last week, but tonight we're going to make threads on, and we're going to be using the thread tool, threads on top of the bottle. We're going to make a cap. I'm going to show you how to create threads on the cap as well, internally, and a couple of ideas or a couple ways of creating these texturing patterns, these texturing features on the cap itself. In addition to that, I'm going to show you how to locate this, because you can draw this on a different plane, I mean, this being your cap, stuff like that, and how you attach that is with a joint. That's under the assemble tool, and you can drop that down, or with the drop down, the command is J, as in Jupiter, whatever you want. And that's how you can create assemblies or moving parts specifically from different components. And that is a key thing to remember with joints. They cannot be created between bodies, different elements. They must be created between components. But if you're trying to create bodies, or rather, if you're trying to create a joint between bodies, and you forgot to create separate components, remember, you can create components from a body. So in your hierarchy drop down, you can open up your body thing, right click, and you can go down and create a component from body. That's the same option as the new component up here. You can select type, standard, external, internal, blah, blah, blah. You have a selection box here, check, and you can select a body. That's the same way of getting to it. So that's at least the path to getting there. And then to snap that in place, I'm going to show you how to use the joint tool. And like I said, so the joint tool is assembling different components, and there's different methods. We're going to be using just a revolve, which is just a round one, or just to show you a couple, we'll walk through a couple of the other joint options to go through. But that's the aim for tonight. The lofted vessel with its cap is due for next week, because we're going to be continuing that tonight. Don't forget, your second paper is due the week after that, November 11th, which I realized when I wrote that, or rather I realize now when I wrote that, that is actually Veterans Day, no classes. and that's just kind of a jerk move. So I'll change the date on that. We'll at least make that Thursday. We don't have class today, so why not? So that'll be Thursday, the 12th. So I'll make those adjustments to the assignment and such. So that'll be readjusted. All righty. So let's get back to the jar. So as I said last week, I had some problems with it. My design was such that I had too many complex forms in my loft between my sketches. And again, please do pipe up if anybody has any questions on any of these steps or anything like that. Don't let me just keep babbling if you have a question. Do please ask away. But the components I got here, or rather, sorry, not components, the pieces of my jar divided up, and let me expand this component back out. I'll activate just that because that's where I'm working. Reactivate the sketches, reactivate my construction planes. Those are all there. Sketches are all active. There we are. So I had my different sketches on my different planes, and me linking these all together was really giving it some problems. So what I ended up having to do to rectify that, now I still need to tweak this a bit because I didn't add the little lip for my pasta jar that should be right here, and this lip down here needs to be much more rounded. But what I did is, instead of the one single loft, if you look down here in my hierarchy tree, and I'll mouse over them, I created multiple lofts, and then and you create bodies as an end result from your loft. And what I just did was join each one, meaning that, let me right click on one, edit feature. At the end, the first one, just like when you're creating a sketch or extruding a body from a sketch, you have the option for operation. You join, cut, intersect, make a new body. That's your combine tool built into, or Boolean function built into the loft function. So I created this first loft. I just hit cancel to make sure I didn't make any changes. Then I created the next one, which was this profile here to the next step down. So it's just straight down, because remember when we talked about creating lofts, it acts like a spline curve, or a fit point spline rather, to where if it's just between 2 points, or in this case 2 sketches, it will make a basically straight line. Now this is tapered because one is slightly larger than the other, but straight line meaning it's not making a curve. Whereas the top section, it's making a fit point spline between those 3 different sketch planes, or the 3 different sketches. I made another because I wanted just this little lip to kick out here. I didn't want it to curve or anything. And then I finally made a last one to go straight down. Now, I am going to end up adding an additional sketch into this, so I will modify this later, because this on the jar is definitely not straight down. There definitely should be a curve to this. But just to reiterate, at least in the last one, in the operation here, rather than new body or anything, I made, or it automatically selected join. And so it just joined all of these together. I don't mean that it did it on the last one. I mean that I selected join for each subsequent loft I created. So this is all now one. Oops, there we go. So this is all now one body. I made the extrusion on top, which was selecting that top plane and extruding it straight up, because this is the area I want to make threads onto this outside surface. Let me hide my construction planes and my sketches just so it cleans it all up. Now, the important thing is order. As I said last week, well, rather, as you all watched painfully happen, I crashed Fusion like 3 times. It froze it up, it crashed, whatever. Because what was happening was there was too many complex calculations it was having to do. Additionally, what I ended up doing is that little round that I created. No, it's not showing the sketch because I hid the sketches. There it is. And then I used the revolve tool to create that little bead. Oops, meant to hide those. Stop hitting the wrong thing. So I wanted this little bead profile on the rim here before I go to the threads. But if I use the shell at this point in the history, it would have also tried to calculate an offset for that rung or that little ring feature. So what I did is I took my history slider down here at the bottom, I slid it back in time before the sketch and the revolve of that feature, which means that it would have really been here. I added the shell, select the top face here. So I selected this top face. It adds in that new tool here, and I'll go back to edit feature to show you. So just hitting 0 there. So selected this top face. And like I said, in Fusion, and especially depending on the computing power of your computer, I often do not recommend using the slider. I really recommend punching this in numerically. Now I just used 3 millimeters. That's a good thickness. You could go 4, maybe something, but it's going to be a lot more simple for this form now that it's a more simple form for the computer and the program to shell or to perform the shell operation to create a wall thickness through and through. So you can see down in here, that is now a hollow form. And you have your options here, thickness, because I could have added it to the outside. Both, that doesn't really make sense at all. So obviously it's an inside tool. Hit OK. It's gonna recalculate a little bit. And there we go. So often enough, if you find that your model, your file is like jamming up, or it's just really bogging down, maybe it's the order of operations, or rather the history that you are going in. Same diff, basically. Maybe instead of ordering it the way you have, you need to perform an operation earlier or later. Like I said, 6 1/2, it doesn't really matter which way you're saying it, but that shell operation for mine needed to be before making this little feature here, the little bead feature, because I didn't want that shell to interfere with that, or rather, I didn't want that to interfere with the shell. The other thing is that the body was far too complex. So instead of doing one large loft, I joined several loft instances, so meaning just in between, or segments rather, let the operation join them. So I had a more cohesive, more simplified form, more simplified body that the computer could work with easier. And then of course we did the pipe tool, and I'll unhide these sketches again. Where is it? Oh, needs a sketch there. Maybe I still have it hidden. Ah, of course, the last one was hidden. And then we created a loft. What's happening here? Did I hide some parts? Yes. That's what was happening. All right, so a couple other things. First, we tried using the pipe tool to create just this standard handle. Honestly, that works fine. It will need a handle. That works perfectly well, but if you wanted something more specific to your design, we use the loft tool. Now I'm getting an error here. The reason I'm getting an error is one of the things we played with last week was with the pipe tool, we had to move the rail, the original sketch, internally, because if we didn't, that handle was going to be floating on the surface. Now, the reason I'm getting an error for my loft is because my profile is cutting weirdly right here. That profile actually should be, and let me unhide the sketches again. Oh, why is it not showing up? Because I think when I originally did this, I accidentally, yep, When I originally did this, I accidentally made the sketch rail on my main component rather than specifically on the jar component. So when I go and reactivate everything at the top of the hierarchy tree, my sketch now shows up and I get my pipe ghost and all that such. Yeah, that was dumb on my part. So that's one of those things that you might have to copy and paste it over, that sort. Still works though, but make sure that, just remember to make sure that you have the component active that you are actually intending to be working on. So I'm going to show you how to fix this loft first. What we need to do is I need to fix that sketch profile. So first, the old hide the bodies. And what I'm going to need to do, first, let me mouse over that and select it. That will show me on my sketch tree. Expand that out. Since I did not label these, what sketch am I working with? Sketch 10. Cool. Edit that sketch. Now, when I originally did this, I did this on the XY plane. So I was XZ plane. So I'm looking at it straight on, just like if I was working on a wall right in front of me. However, yeah, that's perpendicular to the origin plane, to the XY table. But what that actually needs to be, when I look from the right or from the left side, this doesn't need to be perpendicular to the floor. This needs to be perpendicular to this sketch, to my rail. And what I can do is I can use the constraints to snap that over. And if that doesn't work, I can do it manually. But let's check this first. So what I need is, I need this to be perpendicular. I want that sketch to be perpendicular to that. All right, it might not let me at all because, like I said, that geometry is on a different or that sketch is on a different plane. Yep, that's problematic. Well, that's because that's my own fault. So instead, I'll have to do it manually. So what that means is, oops, I do not want to use that. I just want to use move. So I'm going to select the sketch, the move tool. What's going on there? Oh, I need the whole thing. There we go. Select the whole to do. And what I need it to do is rotate. So I'm going to grab the gimbal here and rotate that. And I'm just going to do my best just to, 35. That looks about right. That should be okay. So, like I said, realistically, you should be using the snap tool. So I'm going to select OK. Finish that sketch. All right, still getting the warning. That should have fixed it. So now I have to go back now and re-edit that loft. All right, so edit the loft. Profile. So I'm just going to kill that and select my profiles. So I want along a rail, that rail. You don't want to do these out of order. Profiles, select. Now, if you can't get to a sketch or so because it's hidden or it's trapped behind the body, just hide that and you can select body. Unless it's not letting me. Now what's going on here? Ugh. Why is it not doing that? Cool. That's a new one. I must have crashed it somewhere. Awesome. Always fun when something goes screwy. So if you have a simple enough operation and it's not working for you, just delete it and build it later. All right, let me try this one more time. We got that sketch down there. We should be good. Jar is active. I want to create a loft. It is not letting me. select that at all. Well, not going to waste time on it right now. I don't know why it's not doing that for me. I think it's largely because I have the problem of that sketch, or these sketches are on multiple components, and that's just only going to cause problems. I have one more idea. Often will work. Go back, activate everything. We'll try it there. This is not how you want to work, but let's see what happens. Because this is going to cause just problems. Still not letting me select either of them. Don't know. All right, well, we'll deal with it later. Like I said, the other thing works perfectly fine for now. The pipe, no problem. So the pipe handle works perfectly fine for now. We'll deal with it later. So what do we want to do tonight? I showed you how to do the shell. I made the repair to that so it actually works properly. Novel. So let's start by creating threads. So what you want to do, or rather, for what we're doing here, I try to take dimensions, and also, well, I was trying to research what the threads on a jar actually are. Yeah, it's pretty, it's proprietary. It's not a standard size thread, much akin to like light bulb sockets are Edison type threads. Yeah, there's not a numeric one, so you'd have to guesstimate that as best you can with, you know, obviously math. Yeah. So what we're going to do is just let the tool automatically control or automatically assign some thread size to this for this project. So your thread tool under create is, like I said, in the section with hole, it's thread. What do you know? Now this will create, again, threads. You can select internal dimension or internal faces. You can select external faces. It will create threads on whichever you select. Now for the jar, obviously you want to select external threads. I would recommend just letting it generate its threads automatically. So right here, because of the size, I'm saying it's M36 thread, so it's 36 millimeter wide, or sorry, little dyslexia there. 63 millimeters wide. That's your thread size at 1.5. So 1.5 threads per centimeter, or per meter rather. Centimeter, barb. And you can play around with this if you like. You know, you could go with like, all right, Acme screws. Those are the square threads. If you wanted, you know, pipe threads, whatever, I would just let it generate. And you'll see that as I select some of those, it automatically changes the external diameter because different threads would require larger size. And one of the things here is, if you look in real close, and let me go from just one of the views, you can see that there's like threads inside there. It's hard to see. They're ghosted. Now, what's happening is, to save computing power, to save space on any file, what it's doing is the first checkbox here is a checkbox called modeled. If it's unchecked, what it's doing is it will assign those threads. The program knows those threads are there. And if you tried to export this model to, say, for 3D printing, for CNC manufacture, whatever, it will remember that. But just to save a little bit of power when it's modeling, it will not fully render that, fully model that in your file. But if you check that checkbox, now it will fully model that. And then you can see, well, obviously the real problems that come from some of these things. So that's why I say, yeah, just probably leave it at its standard. And I don't remember which one it was. Metric profile. Well, I'll cancel it and then do it over. Right click, repeat thread, that face. There you go. The ISO metric profile. There we are. Select modeled. Now you can see from the side, the threads are not cutting all the way through the wall, and that's working perfectly fine. So I recommend for what we're doing, especially just for learning and such, make sure you check or select the checkbox for modeled. It's going to clearly be able to show you what you're doing. The bottom one here, you can select the left or right hand thread. That's fine. It'll reverse it. Just make sure you don't mix those up, especially if it's something you intend to print out. Because threads will print on a 3D printer. You know, ultra fine threads, not so much. Regular threads, yeah, totally. I've printed threaded screws and pre-threaded holes on models and such plenty of times myself. But the thread tool makes it absolutely as simple as that. Hit OK. It's going to finalize the calculations, and now my jar has threads. Now, obviously, as I said, that is not at all what a ball jar or standard mason jar thread looks like, because that is something that is not built into the program. You would have to custom make that thread, because a jar is threaded to ball jar, mason jar size for the brand. But there you go. So that it's literally that simple. Threading is really easy on in Fusion. Just got to make sure that you let it automatically size. Now, obviously, if you were intentionally sizing something to fit at a specific thread size, you would need to be aware of how big the material needs to be specifically. Meaning, all right, if I actually wanted it to be a 60, you know, an M63 1.5, all right, well, cool. Then that's the diameter of extrusion I could use for that. So when I slide back to here for just the extrusion, all right, I know that's how big that needs to be. But if it needed to be smaller or larger, I would recommend making that adjustment at that time. Now, I couldn't adjust that directly on here because I just simply extruded the face of this jar. And I'll zip back in time again on that one. I just extruded that face. But remember what I could have done if I needed it specifically a different size, I could have then drawn a circle on this face and extruded that circle into a cylinder. So that's how that can work. But that's pretty much it. Let me reactivate the, where was that? Pipe. So now it has a big fancy handle. And yay. Now we got mason jar. Hit save. And there we go. Does anybody have any questions on the basic threading before we move on to working on the cap? Pretty straightforward. Cool. Okay. Now we're going to work on the lid. So what we're going to do, first things first, activate the lid. We're now working on a different component, and that automatically ghosts out what we're working on, or the previous other components. Now, like I said, if it's visible, you can interact with it. If you absolutely wanted to make sure you're not interacting with this, you hide the thing. Now, this sketch here was what we used. I created a projection sketch from the overall outline of this jar so that I could work with that to create like the handle and things like that that obviously cause problems. So that's what that is. Now for the lid, like, all right, cool. Where do I start? Should I start at the bottom on the original? Let me hide that sketch. That's just going to drive me crazy. Should I start at the bottom and work at the very work from the origin point and then move the thing upwards? Could I unhide this and use the original profile and pull that out? You betcha. I mean, you could do it the other way, and you could start at the origin plane down here, create the right side, or create something and slide it into, or drag it into place. The problem with doing that is it's just extra steps. So what I'm going to do instead is with the lid component active, and you see down at the history slider, it's blank now. I haven't done anything on this component because all the other stuff is on the jar component. If I were to reactivate the whole thing at the top, you'll see all the different parts, all the different components. And the reason this is broken up is because that's where I added the sketch profiles of the project and the such. That's why they're broken up. Otherwise, that would just be one continuous pink line. But I'm going to go down, activate the lid, but I want to make sure the body for the jar is still visible. Now, to create this is going to cause a little bit of problem because what I want is I need something that's going to be the same size outside diameter as this jar, or rather the outside of the threads. How do I do that? Well, outright, I could just borrow the lid here, but you see, I'm having trouble grabbing that because those threads are in place. Now, if I'm very careful, I can select it. But what I can do, go back, reactivate the jar, and then just slide the history slider back before the threads. Now when I go and activate the jar, or now when I activate the lid rather, now I don't have to worry about those threads. They're still there. It's just that Fusion is holding the other component at a previous point in its modeling history. Now I can grab this upper rung. Cool, that's what I need. And really all I need is just that outer edge, just that outer sketch. So I'm gonna start a new sketch. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the project again. So I'm gonna press P. Where'd he go? Ugh, fine. Start a sketch up on this plane. There we go. And it'll automatically use that. So I guess I don't need to use P. I like using the project because it borrows these lines and it translates it over to the new component. If I didn't, I would still be I wouldn't be sketching on the previous component, but it kind of is. So I'm using the project tool. I'm just selecting that outer line. I don't even want I don't want the face. I don't want any of that. I just want that outer line. That's all I need for right now. I select that, click OK. Now I can go and hide the jar. Now I have, oh, I guess it went ahead and copied all of it. That's okay. I don't have to use all of it. It's just there. But I can hide all of that. Now it's currently showing that this is like, did this like snap to the bottom plane? Not at all. It's just that remember that this grid plane is virtual. Yes, it's all virtual. It's on a computer. But it automatically snaps to where you're working. If I reactivate the jar, now you see that construction plane I'm working on is up at the very top. That's all. So cool. This gives me, that's my outside dimension for where the threads are going to need to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make something thicker than that. So first, in this sketch, I'm going to create a new circle. I want it smack in the middle. And if that is 63 millimeters, I want to add a little bit of material there. So whatever, let's just say 75 just for good measure. That's probably ridiculously huge, but I know it's thicker. I can always make it, I can always modify that later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work a little backwards. So what I'm going to do is, that's good for right now. Finish sketch. Now I'm going to use, yeah, the grid went away. It just, because it's way down at the bottom now. Now I don't need that sketch plane because I'm not trying to snap anything. Press Q for push pull. I'm going to select there, there, and there. Now it projected that inner ring. I want the whole thing to go upward. Now that original jar, that extrusion was 18 millimeters tall. So I'm going to make it something larger. So let's just say 22, just so I have a little bit extra material. Now it's yellow here because I'm still on the auto assign colors. That's all. All right. Now I got a cylinder. Yes, I could have just used a basic cylinder tool, but I needed those rings and such. Because what I'm going to do now is I need to open this back up, unhide my sketches again because it keeps doing that. And now I'm going to press pull and perform a cut function. Make sure I get both of those. Internal. So if that's 18 tall, let's do 19 millimeters tall. It's automatically, the operation is going automatically to cut. There we go. Now, yes, I wanted that 19 millimeters tall. As I showed y'all before, I could also use an offset tool, but I'm not going to make this jar lid any taller, so that's where I'm going to use that. Or sorry, not offset. I could have used the extent tool and made sure that it was, instead of a defined sorry, getting words tangled in my brain. Instead of a defined depth of cut, I could have made it a defined distance to the top. But I don't know, maybe I'll change the top later, whatever. But that's what I need. So I'm click OK. Now it is a hollow cylinder. Cool. So first things first, let's go ahead and thread it. Go to Create, Thread. Now I need the internal surface. Select that. Because I used the edge, or I projected the circle, the diameter circle, from the top of the unthreaded jar, it is the same size. So you see again, it automatically generates 63 millimeter size. The designation is M63 1.5 thread. Made sure it's still right hand. Make sure you select modeled. Now it's in there. The slider adjusts the actual threading size and such. Don't mess with that. Click OK. Can I calculate? All right. That's pretty much the basics. That is a threaded cap. It is a hollow cylinder, threads internally. If I re-show the jar, obviously it's ghosted. That's already in place. If I activate the whole project, now you can see it's in there. Now, yes, that's a very basic cap. We're going to mess with that here in a minute, but that's pretty much it. Pretty slick. I really like I really am happy with the threading tool on Fusion. It works really well. All right, let's jazz it up a bit. Yes, we're going to jazz up that cap. So what I want to do is, I showed you in the other example, I made some, or we're going to show you two different things tonight. I'm going to show you how to create just more of that, how do you want to call that? Textured surface. And then I'm going to show you how to create a knurled surface. And anybody that's unfamiliar with what that is, I'll show you in a bit. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you I'm going to use a circle pattern and just create cuts into the surface of this. So it doesn't really matter what I did. I could start this feature now, but it might be better just for ease of operation, because you can slide back and forth in time in your history with your history slider. I'm going to go back before the threads, and before I extruded that outer ring, and of course I have to unhide the sketch, I'm going to use this sketch here to build my texture into automatically. So what I'm going to use for that, I'm going to go back into the sketch, because I don't want to alter I don't want to add a new feature to the, I don't want to add an additional sketch, because I still want, when I slide back forward in history, this modification to be already incorporated into it. So I'm going to edit my sketch. And what I'm going to do for this feature is I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to start on, I find it's always easier to do this if you start on one of the major axes, either somewhere on the X, so here or here, or on the Y, here or here. And I only need this like 5. We'll make that a little smaller. We'll say 3. That's a little bit too small. 4 seems reasonable. Okay. Now I'm going to trim. I'm going to get rid of the outside, but I also want to get rid of that. Yes, a warning comes up. Not a problem. Okay. Hit escape. Now what I want is a circular pattern. Now I added this to my toolbar. Remember, you can make modifications to your toolbar here. If I went down to circle pattern, hit the triple dot, left click, it brings up the little addition parts, you could pin this to your shortcuts and to your toolbar. There you go. Remember what the shortcuts is? If you press S, as in shortcuts for September, this brings up your search tool. Now the circle pattern is right there, if you prefer to use keystrokes instead of a selection point. It's however you like to modify your workflow. So circle pattern, select that feature, center point, around that center point. Now we get to play around. Now it's angular spacing. I want it all the way around. And at this point, it might be better to use a slider at first. Depends. I can't stress enough, this wholly depends on how strong your computer is in computing power. If you have like a gaming computer, yeah, you're probably fine. If you have a more basic computer, I would really recommend just trial and error through numeric input. Mine's somewhere in between, so I'm going to use a slider. You see when and let me zoom in on this. The slider's over here. I don't know why it appeared over there. It should have appeared near the origin, but whatever. When I click and hold this, you see there's a plus and minus sign on it. Right side plus, left side minus. So when I zoom back out, if I select minus, it's going to make less of them. But if I go this way, it's going to create more of them. And each time you keep sliding over, it's going to keep adding more and more and more and more. So this is how I'm doing it. Now, that is with 23 iterations of that same feature. Let's do more. Tell you what, let's try 30. And this is what I mean by, as that slider, sometimes it gets more difficult to work with. Let's try 35. Odd numbers are usually more fun. I want to get that a little bit closer. 37. 38, 39. All right, fine. 42. That's always a nice answer. Okay, cool. All right. Now, of course, poop. What it did not do is trim out that section in there. Well, that's just irritating. Crap. Now I got to go through and do that do that individually. That is definitely irritating. Ugh. Yeah, sometimes I'm not entirely sure why it didn't do that. I got to go through and do 40 of these. Or 42, apparently. Well, 41 because I did that one thing. So while I'm tediously, individually trimming these parts, any questions so far? Just remember, if you click the wrong thing, you can always Control or Command Z. Whoops, just like exactly like I just did. Where'd my part go? Oh, no. There it goes. Okay, I guess I didn't press the button fully. Oof, that's a relief. I'm gonna have to redo all of that. Almost done. Sorry. That should have done all of it, but whatever. Okay. Finished sketch. It's going to recompile all of that. Blah, 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 blah. Cool. Now, since I made that feature part of the original sketch, when I go back, when I use the history slider to snap forward, now that extrusion included that in all of those features. Slick. So now when I slide all the way forward, now my bottle cap has that threading component already featured into it. Okay, now I'm looking at this and, all right, you know what? I really wish this had like some less look like a gear look. What you can do now is I can apply a fillet to these parts. Now, the problem with that is, well, this is where you run into the issue of, I could apply a fillet, but see, now it wants to do it to each individual thing. And that is the problem with making this as, making those features as an inherent component of the extrusion. So I'm going to let that cap be finished. I'm going to click save. I'm just going to start a new component. But I don't have to start from scratch. So just remember, if I'm starting a new component, go back all the way up, activate main part. I want some blank components to this. All right. Lid 2. Now this is going to be a blank component. It automatically activated that component. But what I'm going to do with this, pardon me, sorry. I do want to borrow those sketch parts again. So let's see here. Why is that still active? That's strange. Oh, because I had that selected. Weird. Okay. Activate that one. Hide my lid. But I do need something out of that. So go back down. I want to edit that sketch. But what I want is that projected line. So I'm going to select that projected line. Control copy. Finish. Reactivate my second lid. New sketch. So now, of course, now I lost my component because I was working directly off of that jar. So I'll unhide that and just be able to select the ghosted part there. Now we're good. So now should be able to Control V. Cool. The trick to remember the trick to copy and pasting is you can't just drop it directly on your copied object, or be it a sketch or a component. You have to start, if it's a sketch, you have to start a sketch, then you can drop it on there. So meant to hide the jar. Cool. All right. The copy and paste, we're good. I just wanted that back again. All right, so I'm not going to go back through and like completely redo this. I'm just going to show you the outside edge. All right, what did I do for that? Oh, yeah, okay. I just made a concentric circle off the front there, and that was 63. So would I make that 75? Sure. Cool. Finish that sketch. Ugh. So if I extrude this, now I'm not going to go through and do all of that again individually, but I'm going to take you through some of the features here. So I just use the extrude tool there. Now this is why I didn't just extrude that ring, because then I'd have to make a cap up top. So I'm just selecting multiples here. What did I say? Let's just say, no, it wasn't 20, it was like 18 or 22. That's what it was. Just so they're the same. Now that it is irritating, I'll tell you, the automatic color assigning tool, it assigns these as really similar colors. So that obviously is irritating. All right. So I made that extrusion, and what I'm going to do now, instead of making the sketch or making this alteration as part of the original sketch, I'm going to just make that feature as part of another extrude tool. And I'll show you the reason why I'm doing this now. So yeah, I could select either side, top, bottom, but I'll just select the top just for reference. So that's now working up top now. Select top, and I'll just use a quicker version here. What did I say, 4? Sure, 4 millimeters. And just for reference, if that gets confusing, I'll hide the body. So I'm still working on this sketch here. And it's just hidden the first sketch, which is down on the underneath. That's all. I should hide that, not to confuse myself. All right. Now again, I'll trim outside. Oh, because I'm sketching on that top there. Yes. Let me make a new circle there so I'm not completely going crazy. Oops. Damn paddle. Sometimes the selection makes it really difficult. 75 millimeters. Okay, that's what I wanted. There we go. Back to top. Trim that little chunk out. Good. Circle pattern to there. Pardon me. Center point, right cheer. I'll just do 20 for now, just to so it's not completely maddening. All right, now I gotta go. But what I can do here is, you see when I mouse over this internal, that's selecting. I don't have to actually have those all trimmed away. But that's if I was extruding just the top. That's not what I did. What I'm going to want to do is I want to select these individual features here and extrude them down as a cut. And I just realized I should not have cut that part away. There we go. I actually want that to be there. Okay. Let's redo that feature. Center point, 20. There we go. Okay, so now I have all of these individual features. Cool. I'm going to unhide the body of the piece here. Now what I can do is, oh, I messed up. I got myself confused there. What I did not need to do was make all these iterations. Think back to when we did the revolved vessel. Instead of taking a sketch, repeating that sketch, and then extruding each individual one, remember, you can extrude a part and copy those faces. So what I should have done, and I don't need to adjust all that, extrude that one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the extent to object, and I'm going to select the bottom face. So I don't have to measure it or anything. It automatically snaps to a cut operation. That's all I need. Select OK. Now, when I go through, I can, what was I doing? Oh, right. Problem is it does not automatically snap the circle pattern back to the regular create. It's just the sketch one that it added it to. That's always irritating. So circle pattern, I want this feature repeated around the axis. Now, of course, it's, where's my origin? Oh, origin for this object. Unhide that. Why is it not showing? Oh, because it's all the way at the bottom. That's always awesome. Select 20 again. Now it's repeated all those. Cool. Now I have that feature. Now, like I said, I repeated all of this, one, just to show you a different way of working on that, but also, I'm like, well, what if I didn't actually want, or what if I actually wanted to round out this circle, round out this cylinder? Well, I can use the history slider, go back before I made that alteration. I'll select a fillet for both that surface, or that corner and that corner. We'll do a 3 millimeter fillet. Hit OK. And now it splices that function inside of, at that hit point in the history. So it spliced it down in. And now when I slide the history slider back to current, now it makes those cuts through that fillet. So that's what I mean by reordering things. Sometimes you have to move, or sometimes you have to place different functions in a different spot than you think in order for them to work properly. So this is all about really learning what functions do, where they need to go. So, and this is going to come with time, practice, and just ultimately what you're wanting to do out of this. So hit F6. I'm going to reactivate all the things, except I'm going to hide the first lid is still hidden. Oh, I still had the jar hidden. Now, yes, for one, that jar is absurdly large. Also, this is in the wrong spot. So real quick, I'm going to, pull the history slider for the jar back to current. Now it has threads. What I haven't done yet, let me go back, reactivate second lid, hide the jar, need my first sketch active, and I just need to extrude, which one is it? No, I've gotten them lost. That one. I just need to extrude that up. We'll say 19 millimeters. There we go. So now I have a cut feature in there. And then add the threads back to this one. I just went right past it. Make sure that model is selected, automatically threading. There we go. Okay. Hide the sketches just because it gets really visually cluttered. Unhide the jar. Reactivate. Hit F6 to resize the whole to-do. Hit the home button. Now I have a jar with the threads on top and a lid with threads internally. Problem is instead of it threading down on top, it looks like a hat. So far, again, pausing. How y'all doing? Any questions on threading? Different ways of working on those cap features, anything like that? Not as much. Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. What's up?
If once you've threaded it like that, if you wanted to extend the cap, you can do that now, right? Like you wouldn't have to, the threads will continue after you've set the threads, is what I'm getting at.
What do you mean? What do you mean they'll continue?
Like if you pull the cap down so that it covers all the threads on the bottle,
yes,
the cap will be threaded all the way down, right? Or do you have to extend it and then rethread it?
No, what's going to happen, right now is the program is not currently set. We're not working with it this way just yet. It's not currently set as it is not reading either of these objects as solid masses yet. So things can pass, and I'll show you this in a moment. They can pass freely between one another. And it's not until you actually have, there's a setting I'm going to show you all later. It's not really important right now. When we start getting into more complex stuffs, it doesn't matter. It's not actually going to truly, the threads are not truly going to mate to one another when we do this right now. But it'll just look the part.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Always the apprehensive. Yeah, sure. I think it'll be a little more. Okay. I think it'll be a little more clear when I do this next step. All right. Thank you very much for asking. That is obviously an important distinction to make between things. So that's the thread, making circle patterns. I'll show you how to make knurls in a minute. But first, I want to just continue on this line of thought. So the other part is in Fusion, you can, of course, create joints. Now, you can use the drop-down symbol, and there are a couple of options within here. Under New Component, there's Joint, which is just press J, or use the select button up here. There's As-Built Joints, and Joint Origin. And then a rigid group is when say you want to make several parts of a component or a couple of components. You don't actually want to join them together in one body, but you want them to stay as a group. That way you could then later down the way, if you wanted to make an alteration to something, you could blow it back apart and fix that together. Or say you just wanted to move literally think of it in terms of okay, we'll go with jars. You wanted to, you have individual jars, but you want to position them in, say you're making a drawer for the jars. Well, I want to have all these jars in a box to place in that drawer, but instead of actually joining them together or treating them as a part, it's basically the idea of putting all those jars into that box and moving the box into the drawer. The jars are still individual parts, but they're being treated as a group in a box. You could always dip, but the thing is, you can ungroup them later, so you can mess with them individually if you need to. So that's the distinction on that. But what we're going to work with tonight is, well, first let me just quickly explain the difference between joint and as-built joint. An as-built joint is usually used if you already are importing a model or something, be it from like another Fusion file, or maybe you're downloading, and we're going to talk about this next class actually, downloading parts from a part file. Like this actually has a thing for, if anybody's familiar with the company McMaster Car, it's a company that you can just order a bunch of different fasteners and parts and, you know, screws, bolts, things like that. And what you're doing is wherever it plops in to the, you know, when you import it, wherever it drops it into the program, into your build and your file, that's fine. But Fusion understands that that's a part that's already built, and you can just use that to snap things together. It's very useful, but it also sometimes gets to be kind of confusing because it's a little oversimplified. That's where just regular joint comes in. And this means you have more controls, but at the same time, you have more controls to deal with. It's always the problem with something that is more adjustable, is ultimately that means you have more adjustments to make. But you do want to use the joint tool. And what this is going to do is this will create some sort of interaction between two components. So first off, I already had it, so it wasn't a problem, but make sure that your main, the top of the hierarchy tree, is active. Activate the whole component tree. Now, something to remember, if say, tell you what, let me back up a moment. And what I actually want to do is I'm going to grab this whole lid and I'm going to move this completely out of the way. So I'm going to slide this over, hit OK. Now, remember what some of y'all ran into? Well, I moved something, and then when I made an adjustment, it kept snapping back. When I moved that and hit the OK, this new option came up. There's revert, which will snap it right back to where it was, or capture position. This now, pressing this button, locks your moved object, your moved component, body, whatever you've just done. It locks it into those new coordinates within the build area. And the reason I'm doing that is because joint tool will actually automatically move something in place for you. So I'm going to capture that position. It's not going to go back around to somewhere. Obviously, that other one is still ghosted in there. No big. So I've reactivated the whole component tree. Select joint. And now you have this little drop down. It's going to show you what that drop down is, as you can automatically select, or you can select what kind of joint you want. Its default is rigid, and a rigid is, think of something as welded together. Now, the reason you'd want to use a rigid joint is maybe you're making parts that need to be assembled, but you don't want them necessarily like if they were welded together. You want to make parts that will be assembled through some other method. Maybe they're like press fit, or you just don't want them to actually be, you want them to be made separately. That's why you use a rigid joint. Okay. So when you're creating joints, you have two selections. It's akin to when we were making, when we were using like, brain fart. Oh, when we were using the shell tool, you have to make, or sorry, not shell, the loft. You have to select things in a particular order. When you're creating joints, the first one you're selecting, that is going to be the component that snaps into place for your other component. So what that means is the second component that you're selecting is the thing you do not want to move. And if that's a problem, if you're afraid of it like sliding out of place, whatever, what you can do is you can go to that component, and what I don't want moving is my jar. So I'm going to right-click the jar. Oops, I got to get out of the joint part. Right-click jar, and I right-clicked the entire component, and the the second one down is an option called ground. What that does is it's effectively what I just did for this lid component. That's locked that in position, but that more of just assigned itself some new coordinates. The ground option actually locks that thing, or that component, in this case, the jar. It locks it in place, period. So I can't move that again at all. Of course, that's reversible. You'll see on the component selection, this little pin icon just appeared on the little box. Also down at the the time slider, that there's a pin in place there on the time slider too. All that does is it just locked it in place so I can't accidentally throw it out of position. All right. Select joint. I want to select this component first, and I'll be select for my second component, I'll be selecting this one. And you'll see it's ghosted out. That's why. So how do I select this? Well, I don't want to select the top, and I don't necessarily want to select the bottom. What I actually want to do is I'm going to create points at the top of the center of this jar opening, which means if I want that to lock in place, what I need to select is up inside of the lid. Now, there's different ways of working, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But just know that as you mouse over different things, Fusion, like I said, it will interact with anything that it can see. So as you mouse over, you could make joints about, you could make a joint about the face, all these texture pieces, whatever. But if I mouse over the internal surface, that internal flat spot, you'll see it's a little more easy to see when I zoom in. Doesn't make the reticle any larger, but it is. There's this circle with like a half circle missing out of it. That is the centering selection tool. And you'll see in the, excuse me, you'll see in the middle here, there's a square, but there's also that plus. Like, well, which one do I select? What that plus is referring to is actually on the other side. And you see, it's really difficult to make sense of that. So what you can do is when you're moused over the plane you want to work, on Windows, it's press and hold Control. On Mac, press and hold Command. What that's going to do is that locks your mouse selection, your cursor selection, to the plane you're currently highlighting. So see now, I can't, okay, damn it, it did actually snap over there. But my selection, when I got close to that, it snapped right to that square. That's what I want. Now I have that little icon selected there. It ghosts out that component. Now I'm going to tumble up, and what I actually am wanting, this is where it gets tricky and weird. I want the center of this cylinder, of this negative space, but the top of this lip. Well, again, there's literally nothing there for me to select. If I mouse out there, it tries to select one of the sketches down below. Well, that damn sure doesn't help. Now, of course, one of the things you can do, all right, well, I'm going to go over and hide the sketches. Well, that helped somewhat. And you can see if I'm really careful, there we go. I moused over the internal cylinder there, and you can see a similar icon appeared. There's that half circle there's a circle with a half circle missing out of it, and it snapped to what appears to be right in the center, but when I mouse over there, it goes away. Crap, how the hell do I get there? Well, like I said, you can hold down Control once you have moused over and highlighted the plane you want to select something on. So I'm going to mouse over the lip here, and you'll see that lip plane. That's the one that I borrowed the sketch to project to make the beginning of the lid. I'm going to hold Control down. That locks my cursor to that plane. Now I can slide my mouse over, and it's going to snap over to that spot. Select that. Bam. The jar lid now automatically moves right over and snaps in place. It puts those two together. Now I have the joint selected, or sorry, rather I have the simple joint or simple select joint point selected, all that. There's, of course, other options between two faces, edge intersection. We're going to get into that stuff. Those are really cool options. Okay, joint alignment. There is a blah, 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 blah. Don't need to mess with that right now because it's just pretty much as is. There's another tab to the joint toolbox, motion. This is where you can select, or you can go over here with the drop down. It's the same thing. A rigid joint, and there's an animate under here. So obviously, as you mouse over preview, well, if I try to animate a rigid joint, it just shakes the whole thing around because it's showing you that that is locked into one part. Oh my God, please stop shaking. You have to actually stop the animation. And there's a bunch of options here. There's revolute. That's just revolving. And that's somewhat enthralling. There's slider, and this moves along a solid axis. So kind of like a top hat, how to do. You can choose your different axes. Obviously, that doesn't work for this part at all. There's cylindrical, which moves it on an axis, but also rotates, and that we might actually use. There's pin slot, which rotates and moves along a horizontal axis. Planar is if it was like sliding along a plane. And then ball is it's rotating in all directions. And again, oh my God, please stop. So I'm going to use cylindrical. Cool. Animated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Now I'm going to show you in a moment how to actually modify that. But for now, okay. Now when I selected that, hit OK, a new hierarchy tree thing appeared, and that is my joint. Select that. That brings the toolbox back up. Mouse over there, mouse over, and to the right, the little edge joint limit appears. There we go. Now again, because the cylinder actually has two axes of, or two actions of movement, you have your rotate, and then you have the slide. And that moves the vertical. Rotate is rotate. Okay, please stop. We'll do the slide first. You can set the minimum, you can set the maximum. Minimum, and you could do this by hand or by numeric value. We'll do maximum. We'll do 15. All right. We'll do 45. Cool. I'm going to leave the minimum at 0 because it's already snapped in place. So now it'll only go that far. Rotate. Doesn't really matter. But tell you what, just for interaction, we'll say 360. It can rotate fully once. You can always flip it too. If you wanted to go the opposite direction. Oh, there we go. It was actually doing it. Sorry. Okay. That's how you set the minimum maximum. Now, I'm going to zoom out to everything. Now what I can do with that joint active there, I can just grab this cap, and when I move it, when I move my slider with, or move my mouse around with the left click selected, it's going to move within the constraints that I have just assigned to it with the joint. Pretty cool. Now, right now, when you see when I let go of it, now because I've moved it along even though it's along the axes that I have assigned, or it's on the positions that I have assigned rather, now my position tool pops back up. I can either capture it in the position it is. It'll still keep the same assignments. It's just it'll lock it in that position of movement along the joint, or I can press revert. That snaps it back to its default setting. Press F6, just resizing. There you go. That's a joint. Very long-winded explanation. I'm just going to save it here. But that's because there's a lot of, sorry, I can't avoid saying it. There's a lot of moving parts to the joint. I'm sorry. I'm not a pun. That's just bad, unfortunate lineup of language. So that's pretty much it. Now, I do want to show you how to make knurls. It's just a neat other function. It's akin to what we've been doing. But we're at 7:30. How do y'all feel? Okay, so we're back on. So next, I want to show you how to play around with the Coil Tool. And I mouse over the coil. The reason I want to show you this, it's kind of a blend between a pipe, and a threading tool. Not really, just kind of. But I like using this to create knurls. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a knurl is, it is a rotary cross-hatching. It's kind of, I'm sure you've seen, on like a lot of like flashlights, especially like mag lights or just tools and such. It's basically taking a tool and making multiple coils cuts back and forth, often sometimes called like a diamond hatch or whatever. But it's just neat to use on a cap. So let me create another new component. Bare component, and I'll just say lid knurls. Okay. So once again, I'm going to hide the other stuff. I want to borrow the sketch off of the of the jar, but first I'm going to activate the jar, go back in history before the thread, so it's a little bit easier to see. All right, go back, activate. Where'd I activate? Where'd I put it? Oh, fool! I didn't activate the or I didn't complete the new component thing before I made it. Whoops. That helps. Fool. Oh, no, what? Why is there a 2.1? What did I do here? I am not sure what I did there. Cool. Well, whatever. It did something. Okay. Lid knurled. Knurled. New type, standard. Okay, there we are. Not sure why it did that. Very strange. Hide the lid there. Got that. Start a new sketch based off there. And again, I am just going to start off now because I unhid the other two times. I used the project tool and copy and pasted projection lines off of the sketch. Because it automatically snaps there, I can just sketch directly on there or on top of this plane. Projection is a good tool to use. You don't always have to use it. Just wanted to show you all a couple of different options. So first thing, create that outer circle. Now I can hide the jar entirely and work from there. Now it's still going to ghost in because it is interactable. So I'll go ahead and do that. Make sure that those are in fact there. 55. Cool. I have my dimensions to work from. Now I need one more. And I was still using like 75. Cool. All right. Finish that sketch. Extrude the hole to do. Up to 22. Doing the same. I don't necessarily need to make the threads in here, but just for accuracy's sake. Extrude up and in. What was it, 19? Yeah. And then Go through, thread it again, automatically select 63 millimeters or M63 1.5. Make sure that it is modeled. Hooray. All right. So right back to where I was before. Now what I can do now is I can use the Coil Tool to create basically a path. And what I meant by why it's kind of like a thread and kind of like a pipe is it will create a predetermined form. In this case, you can select it along a path. Only the path is a size diameter of your coil, and then you can select the other parts. So start by obviously selecting Coil Tool. Where's it going? It's not bringing up the toolbox. There we go. Selecting the top there. Where is my toolbox? Hang on a second. Oh, there we go. Whoops. No wonder. That's odd. No. All right. Reselect coil. I want the top. I want the center of this circle of my cylinder, and I'm going to select 75 millimeter out. Now, obviously, this is enormous. This is not even remotely what I want to make off of this. Kind of. So what I want to use this for, and this is not something you have to do, I just want to show you how you can do this. You have a variety of options here. Now, cut, we'll get to that. Type, revolution and height. Yep, that's fine. I can do spiral. There's a flat, this is a new option. For some reason, it was not before, creating a spiral. You can always use the flip rotation, but I don't want a flat spiral. I want height and pitch. That works fine if you're trying to make threads, but just the default revolution and pitch works perfectly fine. Now, what I actually want, though, is for one revolution is even too much. So I'm actually only wanting half of a revolution. That might be too much even. For height, I'm going to use the slider for that. And I'm just tumbling around. It looks weird right now. I actually want this height to go downward. And what I'm wanting that to do is I can use the slider, keep coming up and up and up, but I also know the thing is 22 millimeters tall, so just use -22. Now, yes, the circle is way huge. That's okay, because now the section size, I can chop that down to like 1. Neat. So this is where I'm going with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this 1/2 revolution of this coil. Sorry, let me resize that so you can see it. I'm going to cut this in, and then I'm going to repeat that feature around and around. Now, I can use different selections. Circle, good. Triangular, good. External, not as much. I want triangular internal. I want that to cut down into the cylinder. Operation cut. Good, good, good. Okay. Now I've made this one feature all the way around. So now I can select my pattern, circular pattern. I have faces as a type selected. Make sure to select both of them because you actually want both faces. Axis. Well, obviously now I got to go way back down and select the Z-axis. But now I can start to create, and like I said before, this is going to start getting complex, so I'm not going to use the slider. We'll go with, what did it end up being before? 42. Oh my God. All right, probably a little bit too many. Let's go 36. That's starting to get there. Yeah, I don't need to deselect anything, so I'll uncheck suppress. Suppress this checkbox here This is if you wanted to omit any one in particular, or any few in particular. So if you wanted to make a irregular pattern with this, it could still, your items could still go, full 360 degrees. There's 36, so there's one per degree. But say you wanted like specifically a couple of whatever you're repeating to be omitted, that's what that would do. So click OK, and it's going to start computing. And hopefully not crash. Yay! So, all right, cool. That's how you create 1/2 of the texture outside. Now, the problem is what I did is I only made one of these. So what I need to do is I actually need to slide back in time. Now, obviously, I should have done this as part of my coil thing. Sorry, not part of the coil, but beforehand, before making the repeated patterns, but that's okay. I just wanted to show you what that would do. So what I actually need to do is I actually need to mirror this feature. So I'm going to select mirror, type, faces, same. I'm going to go in, make sure you select both of those. Boop, boop. Mirror plane. Now, what it's asking, not as a point or a axis, but it needs a plane, and you can use the origin plane for this. Now, the trick is, well, what half did I work on? Well, all you have to do is just tumble around your work. Oh, okay. Right plane. So I'm going to use the, XZ plane down here in my origin. So I'm going to select that. If it'll quit bouncing around on me. There we go. So now you see it has created a mirror on the other side of that cylinder. Cool. That's all I want. So when I go back to current history, I'm going to think about it. Unless I just crashed it. Probably should have just saved it. And this is what I mean by, you definitely want to hide stuff. You definitely want to close programs you're not using. Seems like Zoom is a little bit less impactful. There we are. All right. Now you can see where that cross hatching is going to happen. So now let me go back. Edit feature. For that one circle pattern. For objects, now I want to make sure to select all 4 of these faces here. Tell you what, let me turn this back to 0 for now, just so that way it's easier to actually select what I'm trying to select here. So now I have 4 objects, and those types are faces. My axis is going to stay the same, although it might make me select more again. So I'll just let it go back to default of like 3. Okay, cool. It's still selected. And now that pattern is going in both directions. So we'll go with something a little bit easier to process. So like 20 for now. Now I have that crosshatch pattern going in opposite directions. Do 25. That should work. Okay. Now it is used all 4, both the original half coil and its mirrored half coil, because it's going in 2 different directions. And it has made a pattern of that all the way around. And it's just computing. And hopefully, again, not crashing. Come on, buddy. You can do it. This is where when you start making a lot more multiple patterns of things and such, obviously you've just gone from a couple of bodies or a couple of parts to like 30 of them. There we are. And just to make sure I don't crash and lose everything, let's make sure we user save. And there we go. That's how you could make knurls on this. Now, obviously, this is really getting awkward to look at. So I'm going to change my display options to visual style. I'm just going to go to shaded. Now it makes a little bit more sense to look at. Now, all right, I got my threads, I got my cross hatching, all that such. But again, you know what? I don't want that to be a straight cylinder. So to grab that edge, I just use my history slider and go back before I created any of the coil or anything like that. And this time I'm going to use a chamfer tool. Select that edge and that edge. And we'll do 2. And we'll do 1.5 because reasons. Select OK. It has wedged that tool operation between the threading and the coil. So now when I snap back to current, now it creates that pattern in addition to that chamfer. Now, obviously, while it's processing, now the reason I do it that way is because if I had tried to create that pattern if I had tried to create that pattern after I had made the chamfer, it makes it sometimes a little more difficult to use a tool. And what I mean by that is that when I did the coil, I was using the actual edges of the cylinder, the very top edge, the very bottom edge. Well, with a chamfer, I just removed that. Now, yes, I could end up just using it's still processing. Now I could just use the available edges here, but it's one of those things of, well, yeah, I could, write a paper correctly the first time, or I could spit out what I need to and edit stuff back out that is unnecessary later. That's kind of the same thinking pattern that I have for that. So there you go. That's how I made a knurled pattern on this surface. So as we proceed throughout the semester, there's going to be options, and I just want to pepper in little bits like this of you can use the tools to create, like single items, and then use like pattern tools and that sort, your pipes and things like that, and create multiples and create an entire pattern or texture, or I know those are kind of sort of similar, different features of things. It's the same thing if I had wanted, say, like this whole top here to have like a weird, like a circle to it or something like that, like a ridge. Well, I could maybe use the pipe tool, or this is where, like I did, and I'll unhide the jar, when I created the little, it's going to think about it now. It's got a lot to work with. This half round part here, that's where I went in from profile, sketched right on the edge, used the revolve tool and moved that around, but then joined the two together to create one solid body to create that feature. So let me reactivate everything. I'll hide the sketches for that one. Oh, right. Now, there are a few things because I moved the history slider around. So now that I have everything activated, now you see here at the bottom, the history slider is not to current, even though it was to current on that component. So let me slide that forward. Brings the threads back up. Now, this lid, I could then go and add the joint back in, but just for the, oh, there it is. That's weird. Oh. When I created the component that first time and I couldn't find it, it was because my history slider was slid back in history a bit, and it was technically, the history slider was technically before some other things that were reliant on making that component. So cool. Didn't know we were going to get into time paradoxes in in 3D modeling. Interesting. let me hide those, and I'll unhide the lid. That's the one that has the joint attached to it. All right, so other homework is watch a couple episodes of Doctor Who, maybe one of the Back to Future movies. Although although the second one does directly deal with time paradoxes, and that's definitely the weaker of the three. So maybe a time travel movie. Just play around with that. More power to you. Cool. Unintended tangents. Okay. So final things. Press the A button. Constraints and dimensions are removed during operation. Okay, I don't actually care. So we can go and assign some colors and such. Make some smooth glass. I'm a fan of the red glass. And then, I don't know. Because why not a gold lid? Sure. What the hey? Oops, what did I do? I wanted shift in. No, stop things. There, save. Good Lord. Okay, aside from me forgetting just what the hell I'm doing, questions on making a jar, some threads, a separate component lid, making features to that, playing with your making joints, or for that matter, surface features for making knurled lids and that sort. Lots of stuff going on. What do y'all think? I know I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you. Okay, not so much, or I fried out everybody. Also possible. All right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to discuss tonight as far as modeling and such. The overall lofted vessel with threads and cap and handle is due in for next class, and we will proceed from there. And with that, I will stop the video for tonight.